Listen, Piers, I've got a lot of respect for you, okay? You're an older man. Nowadays...
Whoa! That was brutal! That was brutal!
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Okay, it's Saturday again. I got another Piers Morgan debate, and this one is going to be a little bit different than the usual. Usually, you know, we discuss, you know, current events as far as politics and what's going on with Trump, what's going on with Congress, blah, blah, blah. What has this person been doing? But we're going to dip into a little bit something different today. We're getting into taxing the rich and a little bit of economics on this one, so we might learn a little bit. It's a very fascinating conversation, if you ask me, and I wanted to share this with you guys because I'm really fascinated by all these topics and the debates back and forth. You know, I'm more fascinated with how people reach certain conclusionary ideas that they get. Like they see things and then they just go down this path and reach a conclusion. And most of the time, you know, the answer is neither one. Like, you know, they'll debate topics or whatever, and the answers are usually somewhere in between. So we're going to get into all this, but before we do that, I need you guys to do me a giant favor. All right, YouTube doesn't like promoting my videos for some reason, but hey, it is what it is, right? It's a dog-eat-dog world on social media, so if I could get you guys to do me a favor, smash that like button for me. I would really, really appreciate that. It's the only way I can grow. So if y'all want more videos like this, smash that like button. If you're new around here, subscribe. I put out debate videos every single Saturday and Sunday, in case you didn't know that. But on my regular days, Monday through Friday, I pop out 2 videos a day talking about politics, breaking down how you're being manipulated by the corporate news in this country. So, and you're being heavily manipulated, by the way, and I usually break all that down. We go over the politics, we go over policy, and we go over all kinds of nonsense and whatever it is, you know, we go over everything that's going on in the news. But so y'all smash that subscribe button, share this video anywhere and everywhere you can. That would be greatly appreciated as well. But without any further ado, let's get into it, y'all.
I make predictions. What you've said you want is what you're going to get, right? Because this is the policy of the new government. Do you think living standards for your average working class American are going to improve?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, that's good. Put this on YouTube. Put this on YouTube because I'll call back.
Why are you convinced they won't?
Listen, I've got a video.
Because Trump in his first 3 years before the pandemic, that was happening.
Yes, absolutely it was.
So why can't he do it again?
I've got a video, June 2020, beginning of COVID, right at the beginning of COVID, okay? What's the total US government deficit now since the beginning of COVID? Do you know? It's $13 trillion, okay? That's $40,000 for every single man, woman, and child in the entire country of the United States of America. Every single man, even the babies, all right? So if you're out there watching and you're not $40,000 richer now, somebody's got your $40,000, okay? Who's got that money now? So the most amazing thing I've ever seen at the beginning of COVID, we all knew governments across the world were going to give these unbelievable, enormous amounts of money out. The UK number is just over £1 trillion, by the way. These enormous amounts of money being given out. Nobody asked the question, who's going to end up with that money? Nobody. This is $40,000 for every... Imagine if the government came and took $40,000 from everyone in the country. And gave it to somebody. Nobody did the analysis. I did the analysis.
Can you point, if you know your history, can you point to a period in UK history, for example, where massively punishing rich people by massively taxing them has actually benefited the country?
Listen,
because I can't really.
My dad was born in 57. He worked for the post office, Royal Mail, 35 years. Never once earned more than the average wage in the country. He was able to buy a house, support a family. My parents are retired now. They own their own property. They're financially secure. That's not possible now. He lived in an era where the top rate of tax was much, much, much higher. The 50s, the 60s, the 70s in the UK, in the US, the top rate of tax on large estates was significantly higher. And in that time period, it's not a coincidence, ordinary people could afford to buy houses. They could afford to... Listen, this is not normal, okay? Read your history, right? You read Charles Dickens? In this country we're talking in right now, 150 years ago, ordinary men and women lived in desperate poverty, okay? That's going to happen again. That is what it's not normal.
Hold on, but making the argument that 40 or 50 years ago the tax rates were higher and somehow that made things better. First off, times change. The giant middle bureaucratic state that Donald Trump is constantly fighting was not nearly as big 50 years ago. So again, I'm talking about this from an American perspective. As we're uncovering this waste, the idea that, only if we took 10% more or 20% more from this person or that person, I don't think makes sense. As it pertains to COVID, I would say, yes, COVID was a giant wealth transfer from the poor to the rich. I was against lockdowns. I was against putting people out of work. I was against virtually all of the regulations after 2 weeks to slow the spread.
Okay, so he starts off his argument by talking about the deficit and basically dividing that between every single American and coming up with $40,000. Now, I haven't done the math, but let's just go with that hypothetical number, even though it might not be a hypothetical number. Let's just say that. Okay, so what he's basically saying is that is the government coming in and taking $40,000 from everybody, essentially. But that's not how that works. Because how the government works on this specific issue with the deficit is when they need to buy something, they just print the dollars, right? That's devaluing the dollar. It's making your purchasing power less. That's not really taking money away from you. Now, it's devaluing their own currency, making it harder and harder and harder to buy things. Now, he goes into the argument of, back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, the tax rate was much higher. Therefore, income inequalities today, because we tax the rich a lot less, this is why people are poor. Well, that's not how that works either, right? So back in the day, there's a lot of factors that go into this, and I might not get this totally 100% correct, but, I'm trying to look at this thing holistically. Back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, government was a lot smaller. Now, that was a boom period. You also got to look at GDP, growth of the government. There's a lot of things that go into all of this, right? We had like they were talking about, a massive wealth transfer during COVID. And he equates this essentially to the government giving out massive handouts to everybody. And then because, we couldn't go out and spend that money on luxury items, that people pretty much paid their rent, they bought food and groceries, transferring that wealth to the rich people that couldn't purchase anything except for, mortgage, which they don't probably have a mortgage because they're rich. They probably paid off their house, food, and their daily necessities, which are pretty much equal all the way across the board. So the money that they were spending wasn't going back into the economy. It was just transferring up. Yes, that did happen, as a matter of fact. However, they're trying to blame this on the billionaires, talking about, well, we need to tax them more and tax the poor people, the middle class, less. Well, that's a hard argument to get around. But I don't think that's very fair, in my opinion, because, the rich people do get taxed more. We have a progressive income tax system set up in this country. So the more money you make in income, the more money you get taxed, right? So I think that's unfair, just blanketly outright, because the more money you make, the more taxes you have to pay. So, a lot of rich people, they get around this by, CEOs of companies, for instance, they only pay themselves $80,000 a year. Something like that, $100,000 a year. Their company is making all these massive profits, and they take a lot of their profits and they'll put it back into the company. So their net worth is a lot higher than what their actual income is. So they don't have to pay a lot in taxes. A lot of people call that, it's a loophole, and it's a way that rich people can dodge paying taxes. Well, yes, but at the same time, you don't want to get rid of that mechanism, because that is the way the economy grows. These companies get bigger and can expand, can hire more people, can make more products, can purchase more products, can put more money back into the economy to make the economy grow. This is how this works, right? I just don't understand this idea of blaming the rich people for being rich, right? Saying the government should tax everybody. Now, what this does is basically, so let's say we do tax the rich even more. What is that going to do? right? Is that going to be a transfer of wealth from the rich to the poor? No. As a matter of fact, it's not. But a lot of these people seem to think it is. What that is going to do, that's going to take more money from these rich people and give it to the government, who is going to spend it on nonsense BS, right? Now, we could tax the poor people less, which a lot of times, if you make less than like $30,000 a year, you don't really pay much in taxes anyway, right? So you're not paying a whole hell of a lot. If you have children in this country, you probably get more than you pay in taxes, right? That there's a lot of people, if you have just one kid and you make $40,000 a year, you're gaining about $1,000 on average more than what you paid in taxes. All you got to do is go look at your pay stub, add up all those numbers from, the income tax, Social Security. Go ahead, add your state taxes in there as well. And what you get back from the federal government on your return for having just one child is going to be more than what you paid in. Most likely, right? It's not blanketly all the way across the board, but that's most likely the case. To me, that's unsustainable. We can't continue to do this. And where does that money come from, you might think? Well, that comes from the rich people who, the top 1%, pay 47% of taxes. The top 20% pay almost 90% of all taxes that are paid to the government. The top 20% pay 90%. I'm just saying. That's all I'm saying. Let's keep going and see where else we go.
When I bought my house, only a couple of years ago, it was around 2.9%. Well, then it's valuable because, okay, you're going to pay a little penalty and hopefully your house goes up over time. So just removing the government and the regulations and the waste, that to me is the answer. Not just, I need that guy's money and I really would like it.
Could I ask a question? You've accepted there that during COVID, there was a massive transfer of wealth from the poor to the rich, and all the statistics support that. After COVID, after lockdowns, after reopening, we know there's been a massive transfer of wealth from the poor to the rich. We then saw a massive fall in living standards for the middle class and for the poor. Do you think those two things are connected?
From an American perspective, I would say those things are largely connected because they decided to print money relentlessly. That's what we did. We did the Inflation Reduction Act, which was actually an inflation increase act.
The average increase in US billionaires' wealth in the first year of COVID was more than 100%, doubling of wealth. What's the US GDP rate of growth? 3%, 4%?
Top of my head, I don't know.
At what rate does a billionaire's wealth increase? These guys doubled in 1 year.
But wasn't that maybe? But Gary, isn't that a bit
Yeah.
disingenuous? Because the reason their wealth increased so exponentially in that period was just because stock prices flew up, right?
I don't think it's just that.
Wasn't that how they accrued the extra wealth?
I've got a video explaining exactly this, all right? Listen, you lock down the economy, okay? Ordinary family, my parents, how much their expenses decrease.
But are you arguing that the billionaires locked down the economy? I mean, I knew.
No, not all. I'm just trying to explain what happened, all right? You lock down the economy, okay? My parents, how much is their expenditure for? Basically nothing. Basically nothing, because their expenditure is entirely rent, mortgage, food, bills. Like, that's poor people's expenditure.
Right.
Whose expenditure falls during COVID?
The people who have normally would go out and spend a lot of money.
People who have a lot of luxury
So they
spending.
weren't spending.
Non-essential
They were
spending,
accumulating
right?
more money.
So if you ban luxury spending and you replace it with, as you say, government printed money, what's going to happen? That printed money is going to go to people who work in the service sector. They're going to use it to pay their bills. It's going to go to the rich people who own the corporations, who own the houses, who own the debt, and they can't spend it. What you have is basically a massive cash injection from the government through the poor to the rich. Listen, we saw the biggest and fastest ever transfer of wealth and increase in inequality in the history of our nations, and it was immediately followed by an inflationary crisis and a collapsing cost of living. This is the clearest proof you will ever need. You don't need me, somebody who's made millions of pounds betting on this. The clearest proof you will ever need of the absolutely bloody obvious fact that if you massively increase inequality, you will decrease living standards for working people.
Well, it seems to me that the part we're agreeing on is that we all seem to agree that giant government spending and giant government control over the economy and over our lives ultimately is bad. I don't blame...
Yeah, I don't really see the correlation between that reality, which we can all agree to, and the fact that it's the billionaires' fault for getting richer.
Exactly.
When actually a lot of that wealth was just accrued from...
Listen, I'm not Mahatma Gandhi, I'm not Mother Teresa, I'm not a moral philosopher. I'm one of the best economists in the fucking world at this, okay? I'm here to tell you what's happening. If you massively increase inequality, these guys, they don't just sit on that $10 trillion. They don't just sit on it. They use that to buy assets. They buy the assets that ordinary American working families need. The reason why American families, their kids can't afford homes is because they're now competing with a billionaire class that is $10 trillion richer. $10 trillion, that's $40,000 for every American man, woman,
What do you say to that?
Well, I would say that even if we were to take that premise as true, so I'll go with you on the premise, the fault would not lie within the billionaire doing something that is right. So if we're in agreement on that, I think that's positive.
But where does the poverty lie?
So then the issue really is, what would you want a competent government to do? And I think what you would want a competent government to do is make sure that there is as little waste as possible, that we're not spending money on trans comic books in Peru, which is literally what we're finding out right now. And we're going to perhaps audit the Fed and find out where the trillions of dollars to Ukraine went and everything else. And if we have a proper accounting, the same way you run your household and anyone would run their business, then we could probably address some of these issues. But I'm glad to hear that we're not really blaming the billionaires who are just playing the game as the game is set up.
Yeah, what you want to change is the system.
Yeah, look, I'm not here to blame nobody. Listen, I'm a rich person. You're a rich person. I just met you today, but you've got a very nice suit.
I'm doing all right. It is a new suit.
Listen, I'll tell you what a competent government would do. A competent government would stop this massive, massive increase of inequality from accelerating out of all control.
Okay, so that was a pretty good explanation of what happened during COVID. Okay, so now there is a problem with this, because a lot of these large corporations, they're buying up real estate, which, why do they do that? To make more money, right? So that's a problem. A lot of times they'll buy up houses and rent them out. So now average Joes can't go and buy that house because it's a rental. So this is a problem, and I do think this needs to be regulated. But essentially what he's proposing here is it's ludicrous on its face, because a lot of these people, like I was explaining earlier, they only pay themselves $100,000 a year. So they tax that. That's to dodge paying taxes. But where does all that money go? Right? All these profits from their corporations, right? Now, I made a video, I think yesterday, talking about Elon Musk. And this is one of the people they constantly bring up. Elon Musk in 2021 paid $11 billion in taxes. That is absurd on its face, just outright. Now, and you want to tax him even more. Well, to tax him even more, right, you would have to get into his net worth. A lot of times. Okay, so let's break this down. All right, so so the way our tax code is set up, this would have to be radically changed for this to actually work. This would have to be radically changed, because a lot of times there's an argument to be made that, okay, so let's raise income tax to tax the rich even more. What are they going to do? They're going to pay themselves less. They're going to take that money from the profits from these corporations, right? To get out from paying more taxes, they're going to reinvest that money back into their companies, expanding that company even more, right? You might think that's a good thing, and it could be a good thing. But that is not taking money away from them, because they're still expanding their company. They're still expanding their net worth, just outright. So there's an argument to be made that cutting their taxes will just make them more wealthy on top of that as well. There is no real good way to transfer wealth from these rich people, because if you start going in on unrealized gains, which is essentially what he's proposing, because most of these rich billionaires don't have just billions of dollars that they can access, right? Most of it's tied up in stocks, which is illusionary money, literally illusionary money. This is net worth. Net worth is not how much money that you have, just outright. That is how much you are worth. It takes all your assets and puts everything together, and that is how much you are worth, right? If you go and look at my net worth, because I own a house, well, I'm paying for a house, we'll put it that way, and it's worth, if I were to guess, about $350,000. Okay, so my net worth would be slightly over that, because I have a vehicle as well, right? But, that doesn't mean that I'm some rich guy. just living on $350,000. That's not what that means at all. As a matter of fact, I talk about this all the time in my videos. I live paycheck to the day before paycheck, right? Because a lot of times I run out of money before I get paid again. Sometimes I have to skip lunch or bring leftovers from the house to eat the next day because I don't have enough money, enough cash to buy lunch for the next day. That happens to me all the time, right? But hang on, my net worth is $360,000. Where's all that? Right? Because it's tied up in real estate. If I were to be taxed on that $350,000 house that I've got as an unrealized gain, I would literally have to sell my vehicle just to pay the taxes on my house. And then, what am I going to do next year? If you start taxing these people on their net worth, their unrealized gains, like Elon Musk, because he's got $400 billion of net worth, you start taxing him on his stocks. He'll have to sell stocks to pay the taxes on that. I don't know anybody that can look at that and see that as a sustainable method for transferring wealth. That's just going to break Elon Musk, because he's going to have to continually sell more and more and more stock, right? Eventually, selling all that stock is going to collapse the worth of that stock, making his companies go out of business, essentially overnight. That's what's going to happen with that. That is unsustainable, right? Now, I can't see this argument at all. Right? This is not looking at everything holistically. It's not taking in all the facts. This guy just sees this large transfer of wealth and says, tax the rich. He thinks that's the way it's going to work. Right? Now, on the other hand, Dave Rubin over here, and I happen to agree with this a lot, but once again, just downsizing the size of government, taxing people less and letting the free market flourish, yes, that will expand the market. That will grow your GDP, but I don't think that's a fix-all either. We still need to regulate some of these because of people are greedy and they will try to suck up as much money as they can. So there needs to be a proper balance in between all of this. So let's keep going and see what else we got here.
The conditions of the 60s.
So your solution, I completely disagree with, which is, let's just take more from those people. They have too much. And if we only give it to the government, which whether you're in this country or in my country, I think it's fairly obvious that most of our governments are completely fraudulent and backwards and doing virtually nothing right at
who's
this
doing
point.
the taking? Who's doing the taking? Which group in our society is getting richer? And which group is getting poorer?
So again,
who is doing the taking?
So I accept that the rich are getting richer.
I'm just here to protect my people.
Poorer.
I'm just here to protect my people.
I think what you would want
I think we're
to
agreed
do
about the reality.
Right,
what we're disagreeing about is the solution.
And the solution is get the government out of the way. Stop spending. Stop.
But you think the government should be much more involved?
Let me take you by a hand and lead you through the streets of London. I'll show you something.
But again, that's because your government clearly has done policies, it seems you both are in agreement on that hasn't created the conditions for economic prosperity. You might want to talk about importing people that you then had to put on the dole.
They've been slashing the state for 14 years, boss. They slashed the state, they slashed the state, they slashed the state.
So you think if the state
and now my friends' kids don't have no places to go, they don't have no local services,
if the
police barely exist,
things would be better.
The hospitals aren't working, the schools are shutting down.
So if only that system had more money, it would be better?
Listen, I don't want the system to have money. I'll tell you what I want. I want the people.
All the time. The system is corrupt.
Well, funny enough, if you take the NHS,
it needs more money.
If you take our health system, the NHS, Tony Blair, when he was Prime Minister, pumped billions more into the NHS and it barely touched the sides. He didn't deal with the problem of the infrastructure of the NHS. And that was a clear illustration of money, just pumping money into things is not necessarily the answer. Right?
Okay, but who are we pumping money into?
Well, you are absolutely right. I think we can all agree. We have all agreed. You're right. The rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. So what do we do about this? I mean, there is a caveat. There is less child poverty now than there's ever been in the history of the recorded planet. People also, to make you also feel happy, people are living longer than they've ever done in history. They're living healthier because we're curing so many more diseases. water is a lot cleaner than it's ever been. There are fewer like mosquito-type diseases out there killing millions of people than there used to be, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's a very good argument to say that in recorded history, there's never been a better time to be alive. That's why I slightly challenge, I would never say, like you say, you'd never say being poor makes you happy. Of course not. But I've yet to see evidence.
Piers, do you think your viewers are the richest they've ever been? Is that what you're telling me?
No, but I don't. But I think that there's certainly less child poverty statistically
in the US
than there's ever been.
Your average American is
in the West generally, actually. In the West,
your viewers can make their own opinion of that.
You don't think that's true?
I want your viewers to ask themselves, do I feel the richest I've ever been? Because I tell you who's the richest they've ever been, me, and probably you, and probably you, and Donald Trump, and Elon Musk. And in my opinion, what I see, I'm from a poor background.
Yeah, but I think you're a great example of somebody who's made something of himself, come from a poor working class background by your own admission, and you turned yourself into the best trader in the world. You're a great example. And yet what you seem to be wanting to do is almost retreat from
I don't want to tax I don't want to tax working people more. Okay? I worked hard to drag my family out of poverty, right? And I paid 60% a year tax. At the same time, Duke of Westminster inherits £10 billion, more than 3,000 times what I made, pays nothing. Do you think that's fair?
No.
Do you think that's fair?
No, but again,
so let's change it. Let's tax working people less, your viewers less, and let's tax the billionaires more.
We have all sorts of
saying they pay no taxes isn't quite right, because people pay all sorts of taxes when you're running businesses, like payroll taxes and property taxes and everything else. So the no tax thing is a total misnomer. But the basic premise of what you're saying, I think, is right. But I would also say that the answer of just throwing money at everything, the example you just laid out. I was with Bobby Kennedy a week or two before he got confirmed, and he brought up something that I thought was quite brilliant, and I think this is why I will take the bet that we just laid out there, which is that he said in all of his years in public service, and this is a guy that's been doing this for decades, he has never been approached more by, he said, tech leaders and industry leaders and innovators, and he did say millionaires and billionaires, who want to now help the government however they can. We have had a bureaucratic state that has just taken from the people. Suddenly we have people like Bobby Kennedy and like Elon who are volunteering, who could be doing all those other things that Elon could be doing, that he probably
We
should be
need
doing.
more Elon Musk. What struck me, talking to you, Gary,
exactly.
You know what I'd love to see someone like you get stuck into the NHS and make it a better economic model. You're obviously brilliant at economics, right? We don't have enough brilliant brains sorting out the big problems in this country. One of the reasons I really am excited by the Elon Musk thing in America is at least stuff's getting done at breakneck speed, which should have probably been done decades ago. Now, will it work? I don't know. But I certainly would bet on him to make a real difference for good.
Well, do you know where
and I would bet on you to do that, right? People like you should be getting stuck into issues like the NHS, big smart guys who can work it out.
You're saving $50 billion a day already. We're a month into this already.
Okay, well, what it seems like to me is he seems to be pretending, or he thinks that, economics is a zero-sum game. Acting like, there's a fixed amount of money, and if the wealth is transferred over here, that means because somebody gets rich, that means poor people get more poor. That's not how this works. That is not how this works at all, right? We also need to teach people, how to manage their money a lot better, right? Like let's break this down. He loves to use the 50s and 60s as, people were doing well, and we could have a family, a mom and a dad with 2 kids and half of a dog, or 2.5 dogs, or whatever the hell the statistic was for back then, and say, they could make it with just one person working in the household. Well, let's break down why that is. Is that because that, they were making a lot more money back then? I don't think that's they were making more per capita versus how much houses are worth, and how much blah, blah, blah. Sure, they were making a little bit more. That's statistically correct, right? But that's not that's not everything, right? We got to look at this holistically. So, back then, we didn't have a cable bill. We didn't have a cell phone bill. We didn't have an internet bill. They only had one car type of thing going on. So they had a lot less overhead, if you will, for a household. We have all this overhead these days, right? Plus, if you go back and look, the cost to build a house was a lot cheaper. And you might look at that and say, well, they were making more money or something like that. But it's not really that. There's a lot that goes into this, right? So building regulations have exponentially gotten more complicated, if you will, right? There's so much more code that goes into building a house. Like you have to have GFCIs. They didn't have GFCIs back in the day. You have to have fire extinguishers or, smoke detectors. There's all these building regulations that raise the cost of building a house. Outside of that, there's also square footage, right? Our houses today are a lot bigger than they were back in the day, back in the 50s. A lot of people know this. There's a lot of houses that were built back in the 50s that are still around. Those are low-income houses, right? I wonder why that is. It's not because they were built cheaply. It's because they're a lot smaller than the standard today. Our standard of living is much higher today than it was back then. Like technology, everything costs more, right? When you break your arm, you go to a hospital, their overhead is a whole hell of a lot higher because of building code, because of just medicine, everything. People want to get paid. People have to have insurance. So what we are doing, and most of this comes from government regulation. Most of that increase comes from government regulation because the government regulates building code. The government regulates that you have to have insurance and somebody has to pay for it, right? It's a lot of different factors that go into this as to the reason why it costs more, right? So we can't just blame this on the rich people and expect the government to go in and just tax these people into oblivion, right? Once again, if you go in on that angle, you'll have to dip in to taxing these people's net worth. If they have to get rid of stock, the market's going to collapse. Then what you're essentially going to do, you're going to transfer the wealth away from everybody, and that wealth is going to disappear. And you're going to break every single person in this country, because without the stock markets, we can't expand, we can't invest in the companies, and those companies can't expand and grow and hire more people, right? It's going to collapse the markets if you do that. That's not a good idea. And then at that point, who is getting rich? Nobody. The government is the only ones getting rich. And, the government has proven time and time again that they mismanage money just irresponsibly as hell. Just completely irresponsibly. Just look at what Elon Musk is finding with USAID, with the Treasury, with everything that they've been going through and uncovering all this wasteful spending. By God, the government was spending thousands of dollars a year for a single individual, one single federal employee, and they had these subscriptions to corporate press news outlets so these people could get more in-depth news that dives a little bit deeper into legislation, that gives you a little bit more than what the average person would get on a regular subscription plan. That to me is absurd. That's a giant waste. They don't need to be more informed than everybody else. That's absurd on its face. And that's taking tax dollars away from people, right? That's taking wealth away from people and giving it to federal employees for no reason. If those people needed that, then they can buy that out of their own paycheck. We don't take taxpayer dollars and abuse it to give these people a perk of the job just because they're a federal employee. It's absurd on its face. So the government can't manage the money as well as we think they can. And taking more taxes away from these rich people is only going to give the government more money, and we don't want to do that, do we? No, I don't think this is going to work. I don't understand that argument to blame the rich guy and tax him into oblivion, as if they're not already getting taxed at a higher rate. We already have a progressive tax rate. As I mentioned earlier, the more money you make, the more taxes come out. That is how this thing works. Right? But we have these entitlement programs that, people pay the taxes for, like Social Security, for instance. Right? Social Security is it's going to become insolvent for one, but it just as an idea doesn't work unless you could get to a target of like 5% growth with not only GDP but your population as well, right? Because the population has to grow right alongside the GDP for that to work, and that's indefinitely, which is inevitably not going to happen at some point, right? We've already gotten to a point in this country where our replacement, we can't even replace our own population, right? Because replacement would be 2, because it takes 2 to tango at this point. So we're at 1.7, I believe. So that's unsustainable. And we're still keeping up Social Security. You can't get a politician out there to say, oh, well, we need to reform Social Security. Well, you know, a lot of people think that's why the Biden administration had this just insane agenda across that southern border, just bringing in millions of illegal aliens, right? But criminal aliens, which is absurd because, you know, for that to work, for that to be a viable path, you would have to give citizenship to all of those people, right? They would have to be functioning members of society, paying their taxes, buying houses, and that's not how things work, right? We are not expanding our housing market that much. We're not expanding the jobs market that much. It just doesn't work. Okay, so we have to actually expand generationally, and currently we're not doing that, like I said. And then you have Democrats out there like, hey, have you thought about getting an abortion lately? So it's like, come on, with these people trying to cut back an already crisis, right? Cut back on reproducing ourselves while we're in a replacement crisis is ridiculous on its face. And then they just want to tax the rich, and it's all just circuitous nonsense, if you ask me. All right. And all you ever hear about this is, well, Elon Musk and blah, 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 blah. It's like, come on, think a little bit past graph go up or graph is going down, right? Think a little bit past that. I don't think, you know, a lot of this is self-inflicted, in my opinion. A lot of this is self-inflicted. Once again, like I said, with our want to have more luxurious home, bigger homes, not satisfied with a smaller home that suits our needs to what we actually need, right? You look at some of these mansions and you might think, oh, well, that's rich people. Well, not really, right? You got upper middle class. These people buy these bigger homes, blah, 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 that they really don't need. But hey, they make enough money to be able to do that. A lot of people want that status. They want to buy that bigger house. Like, honestly, I'm part of the problem here because my house is a lot bigger than what I need it to be. But that's a choice of mine. I make enough money to pay my note and, you know, kind of live comfortably. Once again, like I said, I only make so much a week and I do run out because I have a lot of bills. But that's my choice. Once again, if I wanted to be rich, I could be a lot richer if I were to have just bought a trailer house on a piece of land out in the country, and I would have a lot less bills. You know, I could go without internet. I could go without a cell phone. Don't have to have those things, but I chose to do that. That's something we also need to look at, y'all. We need to look at all this, everything holistically. You know, we can't just get out there and yell, tax the rich, and think that that's going to fix the problems. That's not going to fix anything. It's just going to make rich people broke, essentially. That's all that's going to do. It's not going to increase your wealth at all. That's not going to happen. But I think I've rambled on for long enough. I've got a whole nother video to make. So y'all make sure and stay tuned for that next video, y'all. Because my next video is debunking something that was already debunked. But I'm debunking a debunk. So it's going to be real fascinating. So y'all make sure and check that out. It'll be up on the channel at 9 o'clock in the morning. Y'all, let me know what y'all think about all this down in the comment section. Blows my mind that some people just have this one-track mind and they see this large transfer of wealth and think, well, let's just tax the rich more. That'll fix the problem. Once again, it's been proven time and time again, just tossing money, like as if you had a bazooka with money and it just poof, just throw money at a problem is going to fix it. It's not. It's not. That's not how things work. It can help that situation, sure, but you have to take other steps to fix the underlying issues that caused that wealth transfer in the first place. But y'all let me know what y'all think. That's all I got on this one. I want to thank everybody for watching. And y'all don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe if you're new around here, and please share this video anywhere and everywhere you can. That's the only way this channel is going to grow, is through you guys. So I would greatly appreciate that. And y'all try to have a good day. Stay legitical. Peace.